Hello, welcome. It's that time of week again for executive update, Q&A, ask away. Nice to see everybody. Thanks for taking some time to join in. Don't forget to tell your friends and your colleagues that this is open to everybody. And with me today, I've got colleagues Anne-Maria, Newham Director of Nursing Quality HPs, and Sarah Furley, Director of Partnerships, Strategy, Vaccinations, everything else in the world. Okay, to start us off, just to say a couple of things about lockdown, and we talked about this in the exec team that we just come out of this morning. Everybody will be aware of the gravity of the current situation, the similarities and the differences between lockdown 1 particularly. Those of you who are coming into work will notice the roads are busy, and there seems to be lots of people about. And there's also this this narrative, isn't it? The counter narrative that oh, you know, it's not as bad as everyone's saying. We know that it is. There's lots of our services that are really under pressure. I know that staff and teams are working, you know, fantastically and really hard to keep on top of everything. And without getting into sort of comparisons about who's worst off, it's really important to say that the acute hospitals are absolutely rammed. You'll see it on the news in London and the South East, but in Notts itself, it's NUH, Queen's City, and at Sherwood Forest up in Mansfield, they've been asked to increase their critical care capacity up to 200% of usual maximum. And you can imagine the massive impact that has on the ability of staff to do that in meeting their professional standards. There has to be a dilution of patient staff ratios and all the other things that flow out of that. The region is being asked to support admissions from London and the South East as part of a national process to mop up some of the excess. And to enable that to happen, the hospitals have to be emptied of other things. But at the same time, we are being urged to continue with as much what's called business as usual activity too. So there's a real challenge in managing all that. A lot of our teams are involved, particularly in community health services, around absorbing either supporting those patients at home so they don't need to go into acute hospital, or facilitating their earlier discharge. So it's a massive ask. We look at some of the graphs in terms of current or recent cases, recent admission numbers, recent deaths. A lot of the graphs are still going up. There isn't much evidence yet that they've started to plateau since the lockdown started. It is a bit early. We would hope that over the next week to 2 weeks that plateau will be hit. But there is still some age groups where it's continuing to rise. And certainly the short-term forecasts over the next 2, 3, 4 weeks are, if anything, that things are going to get even more challenging during that period. So to that end, we've had a further conversation today about our message to staff in terms of particularly from working from home, and there'll be more of that in the comms through the rest in the message through this week. Whilst lots of people are, I think there's still more to do, and we've agreed today that we'll start to reduce and eventually close the rooms at headquarters. We're just needing to work out where those that need to come in could go alternatively, and we are mindful of some people that do need to come into a work environment because of some of the domestic challenges on the home front. So there is that caveat to enable that to continue. And we're redoubling our endeavours around supporting staff, both in working from home, but also those that need to continue to work, and wherever possible, continue with face-to-face contacts, because we know that a number of patient groups find that critically important. Next update around is a briefer one around the lateral flow testing. Last week, we put up quite a lot in the comms about that and the need. There's been a fantastic response from staff. We've had an additional over 7,000 results fed into the system in the last 7 days. So we just wanted to thank everybody for their compliance with that, really, because it's a strong ask that we have to do this. But it's been a brilliant response and puts us in a much better position. So thank you, and continue to urge people to use PPE correctly. We have had an increase in outbreaks since the new year. To continue the lateral flow testing twice a week, and to continue with social distancing. For example, we're hearing that outside of the immediate clinical situations and environments, there's I suppose understandably, you come off a patient-facing ward or clinic, and you go to into an office or a kitchen or just a sort of de-stress or chill. There's automatically a tendency then to relax a bit too much in some cases around use of PPE and distancing, and that's sometimes where the virus creeps in through our defences. So just again an urge to staff to remain vigilant and at all times. And then for me, there's one or two questions about the next bit, which is a longer piece about vaccinations. And please, Sarah's on the phone, because like I mentioned at the beginning, she's been heavily involved in a lot of the system work on this. But some of the headlines are that the rollout of this has been tricky. You'll have heard it on the news. The vaccine supply has been tricky to get off the ground, but remember, this has come from a standing start. But the supply is becoming much more reliable now, and we've got a number of vaccination centres up, as well as the hospital hubs at the Queen's and at Kingsmill. And the number of vaccines now is well over 30,000 within the Nottinghamshire population. Bear in mind, we have about 1 million to do. If we continue to increase at the rate we're doing, we are expecting to meet that 15th of February target for those 4 priority groups. So that's good news. As you probably predict, probably the commonest email I'm getting and the conversation is, when are our staff going to get the vaccine? And that's a challenging question to answer, because there's so many dependencies on that. So we've identified the most at risk and vulnerable. We've got increasing access to different centres, and we've had a long conversation at the executive team this morning about how we manage this to try and be as equitable as possible, to enable those most in need of the vaccine to have access to it first. Inevitably, we won't be able to do that for everybody all the time. We are trying our hardest to make it a fair and equitable process. One of the things that in the great scheme of things is relatively small, which that tends to get magnified at the end of every day, particularly because of the Pfizer vaccine, and that there's always an amount that's left, but we only get sort of an hour's notice, and that's we are trying to collate lists of people that could access that. But you may come across somebody that on the surface or in reality doesn't meet one of those priority criteria from a staff perspective, and that's principally to avoid wastage. But as we get into the volumes of the AstraZeneca Oxford vaccine and dedicated sites for our staff, you'll see that become much more visible, and we'll work through the priority ordering. just some summary numbers to, we think at the moment we've had about 1,300 of our staff vaccinated for a first dose. We've got significant allocations at King's Mill, about 125 slots per day. And we're also going to be allocated slots at the Cripps Health Centre just outside the Queen's, which will be able to focus our staff groups going into. So I'm expecting over the next 2-3 weeks that will become a much more open, visible process for us to start to get large numbers of people through. The only, just hang on a minute, is that we do have to bear in mind that at some point we have to get the second doses in. You remember from last week, you've had to defer those from the 3/4 weeks to the 11/12 weeks after the first. So those will have to be sort of programmed into to what we're going to achieve. But despite everything and the challenges, I'm pretty optimistic that we've got a good system emerging from nothing just over a month ago, and that we'll start to get through this pretty quickly. So that's good news. Don't want to say anything else? I don't think so at the moment. Perhaps before we go to questions, I don't know what, Sarah particularly, is there anything you wanted more to say about the vaccine bits? Thank you.
There's a couple of questions, John, so I don't know, Alex, whether you want me to pick up those questions now?
Yes, that's absolutely fine.
Oh, Sarah, before you go on the questions, can I just mention one more thing that relating to what John's just said? Is that okay? Yeah.
Yes.
So what John was just saying about opening up the booking ability for staff to book on, and we can see that happening in the next days. However, we do have an amount of staff, approximately 800 staff, that are classed as high priority, shielding, high risk, and it's really important for us to make sure that we get as many of those through as possible. So we haven't forgotten that group, and we are working with that group at the moment as well. So I just wanted to make sure people were aware that they haven't been forgotten. We are working with them. We're booking them in as we talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne-Maria.
Okay, thanks, Anne-Marie. So, Alex, should we let you coordinate us as you do this so well ordinarily, rather than us wallowing around in uncertainty? Tell us what to do next.
Absolutely. There's just a couple of questions, as Sarah said, linked to the vaccine, and I think if we would address those now. The first question is, are there plans to roll out the Oxford staff vaccine to services in Leicester and Leicestershire? Our services are 67 miles from Kingsmill Hospital, and this was raised on the Facebook group.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. It's a really good question, because it makes sense for people to have the vaccine either close to home or close to their place of work, and that just supports reducing travel times and things like that, doesn't it? So the way the vaccine is being rolled out is that it is being managed by each system. So whether that is Leicestershire, Lincolnshire, Derbyshire, each system is managing their vaccination programme. So what we're doing is we are liaising with our border systems to sort out whether those staff can come into the Nottinghamshire system vaccination programme, or whether they can be done in their locality. Now, in some areas that is already sorted out, so Rotherham have sorted that out, but we are liaising with all the other organisations around us to sort that out and be really clear. I think we're in a transition period, because at the moment not every system has got every vaccination centre open, because we're still working on the supply of the vaccine. So we're opening as we get more vaccine supply. Each system is opening more vaccination centres. So the choices will become greater, literally week by week. From a trust point of view, we have been asked nationally at the end of last week that we start operating as NHS trusts, and each NHS trust will ultimately become a hub, if you like, to receive that vaccine. We don't know for our trust when that will be. It is going to be within the next fortnight, and the moment that we know as a trust when we're going to start operating as a hub, we will have a central hub for the trust, but we're also trying to get into a hub and spoke model, and that spoke will be out as close to the services as possible to reduce the travelling. So to answer the question, yes, we are sorting this out so we can keep people as close to home or as close to their workplace as possible, and it will change over the next 2 weeks.
That's great, thank you, Sarah. There's a similar question which is asked of Lincolnshire, and I'm assuming it's a similar response. So the question was, my question is, I work for Notts Healthcare but live in Lincolnshire, and there is a community vaccine hub opening this week close to where I live. How would I register as patient-facing NHS staff within a different trust to receive COVID vaccine?
Yeah, we're liaising with Lincolnshire to see if we can get slots released for our staff. If we do, we will communicate. It is likely that they would be limited numbers, so we will communicate directly with the services in that area to get the right staff into the right service. It is just going to take us a couple of days, up to a fortnight, I should think, to get those specifics sorted out.
Thank you ever so much, Sarah. There is one more question linked to the vaccine that's been sent in ahead of time, but if anybody wishes to ask any questions, please put them in the chat. But the question was again off the Facebook page, but I'm coming back from maternity leave, returning to work in October, and wondered if anyone knows if I'll be required to have the vaccine in preparation for returning. And I think a few questions follow up for other people that are on maternity leave and how they can access the vaccine at the moment.
That's another really good question, isn't it? So what I would start by saying is we can't mandate the vaccine, but we all want to protect ourselves, want to protect our patients, and so absolutely understand about that question. Frontline staff have been prioritised for the vaccine, so that member of staff will have the opportunity to receive that vaccine. The government plans is frontline staff will be able to receive the vaccine by the middle of February. So that's what we're working to. Now, obviously, for some staff, there will be challenges for that, for lots of reasons. If you're at home with a new baby, sometimes that's not always as easy, is it, for things like that? So there will be, even though we've got that deadline of the middle of February, there will be continued slots. I suspect that once we've been through this vaccination, if I fast forward 12 months, I know it's an uncertain world, but I'm sure we'll get into a situation where we probably treat this vaccine like a flu vaccine, and it will be constantly available to people through the year. So the message is, you're not mandated to have the vaccine, but 99% of people, I'm sure, will choose to protect themselves, their families and their patients. And if you're on maternity leave, you will have the opportunity to have that. And that particular question, she'll definitely have the opportunity to have that before she returns to work in October.
That's great. Thank you ever so much, Sarah. I'll make sure that the recording of this goes on the Facebook group for people.
Okay.
There's another question. There was, in June, I was tested positive for antibodies, and I dare say a few of us at Notts Healthcare staff were. So given this, would it not be expedient to have another antibody test in order to possibly free up a certain amount of vaccines for others? Expedient.
I'm gonna start answering that, and then I might pass over. So my understanding is that if you've had a positive COVID, you need a test. You need 90 days between your positive COVID and when you have the vaccine. So even though it's difficult to know about those antibodies, because my understanding is those antibody tests aren't widespread at the moment. I'm going to ask my colleagues on the call. I don't believe that we've got plans to do widespread antibody testing at the moment. I've got shakes of the head. Yeah.
So Sarah's right. The lab capacity currently at our disposal is being used for COVID testing, not antibody testing. And it's really important, really, that we carry on with that in that stance. So at the moment, we are testing for patients and staff, and we are still testing huge amounts, big numbers, in respect of testing for COVID. And Sarah's quite right. There is no plans at this moment in time to reintroduce the antibody testing that we did on all staff.
Thank you very much. John, I can see that you've got your hand up.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think the motive in the question was honourable, wasn't it, to try and free up someone else to avail themselves of the vaccine. I think this goes to one of the sort of central challenges around the vaccine, and particularly the first stroke, second dose time scale, and the unknown question, the unknown answer to the question of how long does immunity last. So even if you have antibodies, and there are obviously different types of antibodies, and different types last longer and do different things in your body in terms of protection. And this wouldn't be a very sensitive or specific test to say, if you've got antibodies, you're protected, you don't need a vaccine for 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, a year. And if you extrapolate that out, there isn't much long-term evidence in terms of the vaccines themselves, so how long immunity is conferred for. Hence Sarah's point about we may well be in a similar position to where we are with flu vaccines, where each year the strains vary a little bit, and the vaccines are made up depending on the prevalence in the southern hemisphere to inform the next 6 months. And COVID is a related virus to some of the common colds and flu stuff. So, I mean, it may be that we behave like that, but there's a whole pile of further research and evidence needed. Sorry, that's a bit of a long-winded answer to that, but our advice would be get the vaccine if it's offered.
Thank you, John. And just highlighting what Anne-Maria has said in the comments, excuse me, meant to say that we've had staff and patients that have had COVID twice. That's a very good point as well. So, thank you. On a completely different topic, we've had a question around the CQC. I've heard that the CQC are doing a review. Will they be coming out to sites? And if so, what do we need to do to prepare?
Oh, it's my favourite subject. Can I take this one? Okay, all things CQC. So whoever posed the question is quite right. They are doing a review, and they are doing a review of Notts Healthcare. And it's called something, it's called TMA, which is Transitional Monitoring Assessment. And this is, and the word transitional is because they can't come and inspect in the way that they used to inspect, which was 80, 90 inspectors on site, looking through absolutely everything, documentation, speaking to people, etc., etc. So they've had to come up with a different methodology of how to inspect and to understand what the risks are currently in how we deliver services. So this TMA approach, this transitional monitoring arrangement approach, assessment approach, means that they initially do an interview with a group of designated people like the chief executive, myself, Sarah Furley, and nominated people from each division. We actually had that review meeting last Thursday afternoon, and it was under what I call the banner of well led. And it went very, very well. They were really happy with our responses, but what they also said is that over the last 6 months, 12 months, but majority last 6 months, they feel that they've got a real sense of the organisation. They've already received lots and lots of information. They've scoured all of our documentation, reports, action plans, minutes. So they've gone through lots and lots of information, and they've made kind of like an assessment and a judgment of us. So the first meeting was last Thursday. They've then indicated that they want to do a further 4 services, and they are CAMS, Arnold Lodge, Adult Mental Health Inpatient Wards, and Rampton. So what that means is that, again, it will be a MST meeting with those 4 areas, with designated people from those areas, where they'll ask an array of questions, from anything from safeguarding to infection control to waiting times, referrals. It could be absolutely anything in those areas. We've got a good understanding of what those questions will be, and we've already gathered lots of information and evidence behind that. So you're absolutely right, they are doing a review, but at the moment it's all virtual. Then what will happen in the next 6 weeks, they will then make a risk assessment of us. It'll be like a grading, and they will say, that trust is high risk. We now need to go in and assure ourselves that they are safe to deliver services. Or they'll say, that trust is low risk. We don't need to immediately go in and assure ourselves they are okay delivering what they're delivering. We get a sense that we will not be high risk. We get a sense of that. Even though at the moment Rampton is inadequate and requires improvement overall. But they are giving us a sense that they feel assured at the level of care and services that we are delivering. So that's where we're at the moment. It's virtual at the moment. Then they will do services virtually. Then they will give us a risk score. Once we know that risk score, we will then know what services and core services they will want to go in and inspect. But inspections will not be like they used to be, those big 80, 90 people. It will not be anything like that. It will still be conversations with staff, conversations with patients, conversation with carers, but it will be, majority of it will be collation of lots of information and evidence. You can see it's a passion. I can carry on, but I think that's enough.
John, thank you, Anne-Maria.
Can I just add a couple of bits to that, Anne-Maria, because that was a really good summary. But to say to people and to spread the word, we had I think it was one Thursday or Friday last week, we had over 130 staff on the call with the CQC. They were sharing some of their new methodology and thinking, but also a broader conversation about PrEP. So that's a regular running program, and if you've not been on it, it doesn't matter, you can join at any time, and that's a really good repository of what we need to do, good stuff, and how we prep further. And so sign into that if you see it around. I think the other thing to reiterate about the CQC, and I think we're starting to get ourselves into this position, is that as they said on that call, we've got, although we're coming at it from completely different paths, we've got the same objective here, to make sure that we're delivering the best care we can for our service users and patients, and that I think organisationally we've moved from them coming to mark our homework to a position where we're starting to say, look at this fantastic work we've done here, look at this improvement piece we've done here, look at how things have changed for the better since ... And if we can collate that and just get into that being the normal way that we do things, we become less concerned about when the CQC come in, because it's there. Our staff are confident and competent about talking about the great work they're doing, because it's part of the day job, it's part of what they do. Because you all know that people are really passionate about the services we provide. So I'm really confident that we're starting to get into a much more positive front-footed groove with the CQC, and they're starting to acknowledge that too. So it's don't worry, about, oh, are they coming? Because they will, and the world will get back to normal, and the CQC will be probably in lesser numbers, as Anne-Marie is saying. But it's a thing to welcome and embrace, and that might sound a bit sort of funny to people, but it works much better like that.
That's great, thank you, John. And just to highlight in the comments, Andrea Dickens has said, as staff side chair, I'm more than happy to be interviewed from staff side, and Neil has concurred with that. And Anne-Marie has said they've always done staff side panels in the past, not sure if they will do focus groups like they've done before. So that's great, thank you. And Jenny has also put a link into the meeting that happens on Friday, so that's great for anybody that wants to see that as well.
Yeah, Alex, I'd really recommend, if people if they weren't on that call or hadn't seen it, if you've got a few minutes, have a look at that, because it's from the horse's mouth, as it were. The CQC lead inspectors for us, quite senior people, are giving it for real. And some people might be surprised if they've not had any sort of direct line of sight on some of that conversation. And it's much more of a co-produced, joined up together piece. It was a really impressive session. So just to flag that, doubly flag it. Thanks.
That's great. Thanks, John. We've had one more question. So if anybody wants to add any questions to the chat, we've got 10 more minutes in the meeting. But just also to highlight a comment from Neil Thompson, who said earlier on in the meeting, I spoke to a colleague in Portsmouth yesterday who's a critical care manager. She's very angry about abuse of some of her staff on social media and the fact that currently busier than ever before. Currently they have 3 times more critical care patients than they normally have beds for, having to use operating theatres to house critical care patients. So just to say, really, this is a whole country issue, and this is absolutely vital that people do follow the rules all of the time, and remember we are all in this together and can support each other that have to do this remotely. Keep safe and happy, to be another listening ear for anyone who needs support. So thank you for that, Neil.
Yeah, can I reiterate that, Alex, for Neil? Thank you, Neil, for putting that in. I think it's a really valid comment. We are all in this together. You know, we don't tolerate the sorts of behaviours that you see on you know, in the national press, on social media. It's very easy to get sucked into quite polarised debates, isn't it? And just you know, I think we're doing so well, but appreciating that everybody's got their own personal challenges as well as work challenges, and there's so many really difficult situations and questions and stuff that people are having to navigate through and sort out, and the rule book isn't written for this. You know, I get it wrong, the exec team gets it wrong. You know, we're making decisions, you know, really important, serious decisions with implications on such a regular basis. But it's just to re-emphasise, it's okay to say, oh, hang on a minute, I might not have got that right, or we'll have a rethink. There's some more information. We might need to change our view on things. And so it's that sort of tolerance of that. I think certainly as a senior leadership community, I think we've got that in spades coming out. But just a sort of call to arms for us all to continue to sort of, where possible, to keep that sort of balanced view on where we are. Sarah?
I absolutely agree, John. You know, if nothing, this is bringing really strong emotions out, isn't it? In us all, whether that's, you know, in our personal lives or whether that's professional lives. You know, and some days are easier than others, and that's, I think, again, normal for everybody. And there's that thing for me about, we just need to be kind to each other, because some days are a good day, some days aren't good days, some days we get it right, some days we don't get it right. So just recognising we're all in the same place, we're all in it together, and being kind to each other. Thanks, John.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sarah. The final question that's been sent in complete tangent. So I work in the community and often drive over 3,500 miles, which means my mileage reduces and I'm out of pocket. Following John saying last week that we won't be out of pocket, what is happening about this?
Right, yeah, so bear in mind what I've just said. This is slightly frustrating because it's wrong that people should be out of pocket on things like this that are completely out with their control. So specifically, we have put an interim measure in place, and it's been agreed that employees will receive a lump sum payment of £760 every time 3,500 business miles have been travelled between last April and March coming. And this means a lump sum payment at 3,500 business miles, another lump sum payment at 7,000, etc. These queries, if there are queries about that, they can be picked up on there's an email that we can put in the chat. But I'm aware that having put this in various staff messages and reiterated it on a number of occasions over recent months, that we're still getting issues. So it's an apology for individuals that where this hasn't been resolved. But if you could bear with us, and if you could raise the issue specifically, we will continue to look at it and make sure that people aren't out of pocket, because as I said, it's not right that, you know, for all sorts of reasons, bases have changed, people aren't travelling as far, and if you're not clocking up and incurring financial penalties, we will make sure it's resolved.
That's great, thank you so much, John. There aren't any other questions that have been asked. Is there anything that anybody wants to say? Anything further?
I'll just add something. I mean, I don't know if everybody else can see, but John Brewin's frozen on the screen. But I just wanted to mention one of the things that's high in the press at the moment is critical care staff, intensive care staff, and how they're feeling. So I just wanted to give some assurances that we are working as a system with regards to health and well-being, and we have been approached by NHS England and NHS Improvement to see if we can support our critical care staff around psychological support and psychological input. And that's something at the moment that Tracy Orlandi is doing a piece of work with. So we've already got a very, very good health and wellbeing offer into the system and into our own staff as well. And Tracy and her team have done an excellent kind of like getting out there and awareness raising and the importance of mental health when it comes to all staff. So I just wanted to let you all know really that we are working with our colleagues, and it is about ensuring that they are okay as well, because the impact will be on all of us. So it's important for us to work as a system and to make sure that those nurses that are doing a difficult job, as well as ourselves, are also supported in that way. So I just wanted to let you know that the health and wellbeing offer is there. Psychological support has been requested, and we're looking to see what we can do for that. I also wanted to just mention we have had quite a few outbreaks since the beginning of January. So I spoke to you last Wednesday and said that it was important for us all to adhere to PPE guidance and social distancing. Well, we've had 5 new outbreaks, and I chair those at 4 o'clock each day. And I just wanted to say that they are quite upsetting and challenging and difficult, because some of these outbreaks are affecting a lot of staff and a lot of patients, particularly some of the patients that have not gone necessarily out of grounds or gone on leave or been admissions, but they are patients that are with us for months and years, and they are getting the virus. Some of them have been very poorly, but I just wanted, it's just sort of like a plea really to say it's really important for us to remember that this COVID virus is is very, very transferable. It you know, it kind of like moves very, very quickly between staff, and it only takes one member of staff to be positive, and you know, several other staff are affected very, very quickly. So we must do everything we possibly can. And also we've got the lateral flow testing, which is in our gift. We've got plenty of boxes, so I don't want staff to feel that it's not there for them, because it absolutely is if they're looking after our patients. So please make sure that you've got access to a lateral flow kit. You are doing the testing, because it does give us a heads up, and it stops the spread, because as soon as we know somebody's positive, we, you know, isolate. It means that other staff then are not affected by that. So yeah, so just a couple of things there I wanted to reiterate and say a big thank you for. Remember, you can still go and have your flu vaccine as well.
Right.
See, it'd be wrong of me not to say that, wouldn't it, to all of you, if I didn't mention flu.
I was wondering if you were going to say anything about.
Yes, it had to be there at the end.
Catherine Contra has put a question in the chat, and we've just got 1 minute left. Just asking, what are the execs doing to look after themselves? And I know this has been asked before.
Shall I start? So I run at weekends, long distances. I've got an extra, I like to set myself different tasks. So this weekend, there's a standing joke in our house, because I like cooking, that we've got loads of knives and they're all blunt. And instead of sharpening them, I buy another knife until that goes blunt. I've got about 3 different sharpeners, which I never use. The only knife that works is about a 25-year-old kitchen devil that's half broken. So this weekend, I've got my grindstone and got my oil. I'm going to be sharpening all the knives. And I'll be taken away in my head to a completely different world of is the angle right, is the oil right, and are the knives sharp, and I can just chill.
Excellent.
You need to concentrate, John. You need to concentrate on the job in hand. We don't want you missing fingers.
Yeah, and the other thing is, if there are any therapists on this call, don't read anything more into that. Why I'm sharpening knives? I'm just sharpening knives because I'm sharpening knives. There's no subconscious going on.
Yeah, I think there's some comments in the chat there. I don't know if Anna Maria and Sarah wish to answer the question.
Off you go, Sarah. I never know. I'll be honest with you. I never know what to say to these questions. We've talked about it before, and I am a really resilient person, and I've got really good family life and really good home life, and I do watch television. I can't deny it. I do watch quite a bit of television, so, and I do try and do my boot camp. So no, life is okay. Life's good.
That's great.
Tried to do dry January. It lasted 4.5 days. So no, I'm rubbish at that.
So from my point of view, my guilty pleasure has been Bridgerton. So I don't know if anybody else has watched that, but that's been my guilty pleasure. I get a lot of I feel peace in my heart if I'm outside in nature. So at the weekends, I tend to walk the dog, and the poor dog, you know, by the time we've done 7 or 8 miles, he's knackered and he's like, can I go home, please? So I tend to do a lot of that at the weekends. I have to say, from a professional point of view, I feel personally really well supported by my executive colleagues. And for that, I'm very grateful at work. So I look at all of you as staff and feel so proud in what all you're doing. And then my exec colleagues support me as well, and I hope we can support each other. So that's how I try and keep my resilience as well.
That's great, thank you, Sarah. And there's a lovely lovely illustration that Joel put into the chat as well. And Catherine has just said, key point being, we value you all too and understand some of the challenges you face, so please take time for yourselves too and practice what you preach. Thank you thank you all very much for attending the session. The recording will be uploaded onto and shared on Connect and on the Facebook group. But again, if anybody's got any questions in the coming week, please email them to staff engagement, and we can make sure that the questions asked on the chat. Is there anything else that anybody wishes to say? John, Anne-Maria and Sarah?
No, thanks, Alex. Thanks everybody for their contributions. Good session as ever, and we'll see you all next week. Tell your friends. Thanks. Bye.
Bye. Bye.